You've tuned into another edition of The Break Room, a weekly conversation about how the City of St. Augustine works from those who do the work every day. Hosted by the City of St. Augustine's Communications Director, Melissa Wissel, The Break Room offers a closer look at the different city departments and provides updates on current and upcoming projects and events. And now for your host of The Break Room, Melissa Wissel.
Welcome to The Break Room. We're glad you could join us. The Break Room is a place for us to sit back together for a few minutes and take a break from our daily work, catch up with coworkers, and hear about what's happening in and around the city. I'm Melissa Wissel, Communications Director for the City of St. Augustine. Joining me today in studio, I'd like to welcome back Jenny Wolfe, the city's Historic Preservation Officer, and we're going to pick up where we left off. The last time Jenny was here, we talked about the Resilient Heritage in the Nation's Oldest City publication, a great educational resource for our residents when it comes to understanding solutions for flood mitigation. However, we ran out of time just as we started to talk about what the city is doing next as a result of that study. Jenny, welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me, Melissa. I could talk about historic preservation all day long, so I'm happy to come back with you.
Great.
So I guess where we'd start off is, again, just summarizing what we looked at with the Resilient Heritage publication. It really is a great educational tool, as you pointed out, for the city, city government as a policymaker, as a property owner, but also to set an example for what concepts could be adopted by historic property owners as well as any other property owners that might be dealing with flood damage or potential of flooding on their property from either storms, nuisance flooding, or sea level rise. So definitely check that out at www.citystaug.com/resilientheritage.
And that's where we're going to find the publication and the story map.
Yep.
And where are we with this now in terms of what the city is doing next?
Well, we launched right away, almost seamlessly, into more projects because we were able to apply for some other grant funds for 2 more projects from the National Park Service that are actually federal hazard mitigation projects funded from Hurricane Irma. So we're doing more identification of properties that were damaged, understanding what potential mitigation best practices are in those neighborhoods, as well as more education and toolkit resources for property owners. So whereas the Resilient Heritage Project was more of a comprehensive level of study, now with these 2 projects, we're diving into specific neighborhoods. So we're looking at the National Register districts of the Model Land Company, Lincolnville, and Abbott Tract as part of one project. So we're going to be resurveying those 3 districts and updating the National Register nominations, and then also coming up with best practices for what flood mitigation could be done with the types of buildings that are in those neighborhoods. And then we're also doing a project similar to that, but it's going to be in the town plan. So in the town plan, we know we have National Historic Landmark resources from our Spanish colonial time periods, and those are some of our most vulnerable above-ground resources because they're difficult to relocate or adapt as more traditional historic buildings. So we'll be learning some more from the consulting group who's working on that project.
And when you talk about inventory for the city, that's a good first step for a homeowner, regardless of whether I'm historic district or out off 16 even. How would I go about doing that? What would I look at?
So you want to look at the flood maps, understand what flood zone you're in. Our story map, you can type in your address. You can also go to St. Johns County. They have an easy-to-access webpage where you can figure out what your flood zone is. So understand what your zone is and what that means. So Google that if you don't know what your flood zone AE means, what the 1% chance means. Look that up so that you can understand what your risks are. And then you want to take a walk around your property and see where the potential areas of access for floodwaters is. And that's the one thing that really helped us with the Resilient Heritage Project is we got a whole encyclopedia of resources that you could adopt at your own property to mitigate against future flood losses.
I'm sure many of us know our vulnerabilities of our properties because most of us have been through one or two, a few storms, a few flooding events. Yes. So we probably do know what those are. in terms of where my vulnerabilities are. Talk again, if you would, just a few of those solutions that you came up with that are something that I can understand.
Sure. So within the concepts for flood mitigation, you can look at certain natural things as well as certain physical impacts to a historic structure or non-historic structure. Natural things may be adding a berm, planting certain trees that absorb certain amount of water. A lot of property owners, and especially in our downtown, have property walls because that's part of our historic character. So in making sure that they're secure, that they're tall enough, they can hold up against the weight of floodwaters, either pushing in or pushing out, and making sure that any gaps are secured with either temporary door dams or repairing. Really, routine maintenance and repair is one of the biggest things, again, back to surveying, that you can do. When it comes to the physical building, we can look at certain types of flood wrap. Temporary flood barriers. There are lots of examples. In fact, I'm from Iowa, and when the Big River flooded in 2008, I actually got to go back and see some of the mitigation efforts that they did that are shown in our Resilient Heritage publication, which is these temporary boxes are uncollapsed and filled with a solid material, whether it's rock, whether it's sand, or some other type of material that keeps it very rigid, so it acts as a temporary barrier. That's something that can be done with little impact to a historic property, specifically in a place like St. Augustine, where we don't want to do as little permanent impact as possible.
We want to keep things looking nice. We don't necessarily want to put up some ugly, structure that just, this is going to keep the floodwater out. Yeah, but it looks horrible all the other days of the year that I have to look at that.
There's a balance. And that goes along with other physical mitigation efforts like elevating historic structures, which we see a lot in St. Augustine. And we encourage that, but there are best practices to make sure that it blends in with the streetscape. And so that's what these 2 additional grants will be looking at specifically with our historic neighborhoods.
If you're just now tuning in, you're listening to The Break Room. I'm Melissa Whistle, Communications Director for the City of St. Augustine. Today in the break room with me is Jenny Wolfe, the city's Historic Preservation Officer, and we are talking about next steps for the city and residents in carrying forward flood mitigation efforts that were identified in that Resilient Heritage study that we are talking about. Jenny, you're talking about grants, both from the city side. It's a wonderful tool so that it's paid for almost a lot of the things that we do. But we also have residential grants that are out there that we want to make sure that people are aware of. Can you tell us a little bit about grants, both for the city and residents?
Sure. So just to kind of start at the top, to make it clear that we try to leverage as little city funds to get as much bang for our buck as possible. Just to give you a picture of what that looks like, we have over $1 million in grant projects right now that we're working on within the Historic Preservation Division alone of the Planning and Building Department. And only $290,000 of that was city match funds.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So we really work hard to try to find ways to spread our dollars as far as possible. So we're fortunate to be able to accomplish these studies with grant projects and some city matching funds. But one of the things that the Resilient Heritage study pointed out is really a need to provide more financial incentives for property owners. So one of the things that we've carried forward from the Resilient Heritage publication is adding in some flood mitigation projects to the St. Johns County local mitigation strategy. So there's a county-wide group that looks at all types of flood mitigation, actually not just flood, all hazard mitigation projects in the county. And that group is in charge of adding projects to that list. So we added a few projects to that list from our Resilient Heritage publication so that we could actually implement some of those concept designs that were recommended. But additionally, we want to look at ways to incentivize private property owners to adapt their homes and properties for flooding and other hazards. And a couple of things that are available is the fact that if you're a historic property owner, you could get a historic property tax exemption for a flood mitigation project. But also, there's been some funding applied for through the St. Johns County local mitigation strategy to do private property flood mitigation. In other words, there may be right now I think 2 single properties that are on that list that could be getting grant funds if it's prioritized to elevate their property or to mitigate their property for flooding. In the future, that may look like more individual properties, or it may look like sections of streetscape, neighborhoods, street blocks of properties that could be mitigated for flooding as one project. Okay. So what you want to do is make sure that you pay attention to what is on the local mitigation strategy list of projects. Mm-hmm. And if you think that you want to get in on that list, contact our floodplain manager, Richard Showland, in the city's planning and building department to help get that started.
Yeah, I'm going to speak to this just briefly because I don't know all the details, but I'm going to say it so that it at least gives our listeners a chance to think about something. If you have flooded multiple times, you've had insurance, there is a program out there. I believe it comes out late summer, early fall. So tune in again and we'll make sure to get the details correctly, but that individual homeowners can apply. It's a longer process, my understanding. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't happen overnight, but there are options and opportunities out there where if you're wanting to raise your home, you can get that either reimbursed or paid for through some of these grant funds as well. Are you familiar with those?
I'm familiar with the St. Johns County, the LMS program is an option, which may be funding some of that, as well as individual properties could get some monies from the increased cost of compliance through FEMA.
Right.
And so they are paying funds that go toward flood mitigation, including building elevation.
So the point there is there are options. There are programs out there. You mentioned our building inspector, our floodplain manager, Buddy Showland, and you can call the Planning and Building Department 825-1060. And that's one way of learning some more, and we'll certainly make sure that in the coming months we bring back those folks who know more about it. But we definitely want people to know the city looks to save money and find some of those grants, and we're going to do what we can to provide at least the information for our residents to be able to find those grant and funding sources as well, because it gets expensive.
It is.
It's extremely expensive, and I think people just want to throw their hands up.
It's a scary proposition, and I think that the best thing that we can do is what we're doing, which is trying to take it one piece at a time. We're trying to understand our vulnerabilities, understand the threats, and start identifying ways that we as the city can adjust our policies and also recommend flood mitigation efforts to individual property owners.
Great. Well, yet again, we've come to the end of our time. Lots of good conversation, Jenny. Please come back and see us again. And I look forward to talking with you again about historic preservation, flood mitigation, all of it.
Thank you, Melissa.
Good stuff. As we wrap up another edition of The Break Room, I hope we answered your questions. If we didn't, take a minute and drop an email. Send that to info@citysanog.com. Let me know what we missed or if there's someone you would like to hear from. We want to keep you informed about what's happening in and around the city, and most importantly, that you hear it here from the people doing the work and making it happen every day. In order to be connected, you need to stay connected. So follow us on all of our social media platforms. You'll find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram @CitySanog.
You've been listening to The Break Room, a weekly program addressing projects and programs offered by the City of St. Augustine. Join us each week as the city's communications director, Melissa Whistle, has in-depth conversations with the people who make our town work to meet the needs of our community. The Break Room is produced by communications specialist for the City of St. Augustine, Cindy Walker, and engineered by Flagler College communication major, Lily McNeil. See you at this time next week for another edition of The Break Room.